Welcome to another Confident Counselors Conversation. Here's what we're chatting about today. What counseling activities do you use to work on self-regulation?
When students get referred to us for counseling, so often it's because they're having difficulty managing or controlling emotions. And that could be anything from anger, anxiety, sadness. But it boils down to that they don't have the strategies to manage them. They can't identify it. They don't know what to do when. And then those emotions can become too big for them to control and have negative consequences. So typically what I do with almost every student I have for individual counseling is that we build a plan related to self-regulation. And how we do that is through a couple simple steps. Sometimes, depending on the child's age, we can skip these steps, we can combine them, but we always start with identifying feelings. And then from that, picking out what the problematic feeling is. So if it's anger, we'll go with that. Then from that, I want them to then learn how to scale that emotion. So to take it from a small, tiny little thing like being bothered all the way up to being furious. And understanding that that's the same emotion, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and harder to control. Then what we do for each of those, we look through and see how do we feel at each, depending on what that is. So when we're bothered, what does our body feel like? And when we're furious, what does it feel like? What do we look like? How does it sound? And then we'll start to look at what are the kinds of events that make us feel bothered? What are the kinds of events that make us feel furious? And those are going to be different. And so kids will start to build kind of almost a matrix for themselves, like almost a rubric. They'll go through the kinds of thoughts that they think. That's a bit harder for younger kids. But starting to think, what do I start to think in my head as this emotion starts to get bigger and harder to control? And then last, what we're doing during this time, we're also building in coping strategies. But the last thing that we're doing is matching coping strategies to the size of that feeling. So we want to make sure that if we're furious, we're not spending 5 minutes coloring, because that's going to wind up with broken crayons and crumpled paper. What's the best strategy for that emotion, depending on how big it is? And so we create this one-page sheet that they have. And we tweak this all the time, over time. So students will often, who I see for counseling, come see me after something not so great has happened. We take out that one-page sheet and we go through it. We start to figure out, what was it? How was this? What happened? What triggered this? How big was the feeling? What did it look like? What did it feel like? What was I thinking? What strategy did I try? And we tweak our plan. We look at whether we were able to follow through on what the plan was, as far as the strategies we were supposed to use, what we want to do next time, and we replay it that way. So it's a living document while also showing all the things that they've learned about self-regulation at the same time. I find that having that kind of go-to, very simple document is a great way for students to start to build those self-regulation skills.
It's Gretchen from Speckled Moose Counseling. When it comes to emotional regulation, I am a big believer in name it to tame it. I know that children developmentally aren't always able to express complex ideas or feelings, and I really think it's our job as counselors to help them develop those emotional identification skills. One of the most basic counseling skills that we all learned in grad school is reflection of feeling, and I use it all the time. It doesn't matter if it's a classroom lesson, lunch groups, one-to-one with kids, or even sometimes in the hallways when I notice things happening with students. I'm reflecting their feelings back to them and hoping to make those connections for them with what's going on in their bodies, as well as the emotion that they're experiencing. Once they're able to understand it and label it and name it, I think it's much, much easier to then work with them on the where and when questions. Where are you feeling this in the body? When are these things happening? And to then take those steps to help kids develop and learn their calming strategies and helping to manage those emotions. I also use a ton of different popular children's games in my counseling office, and I transform them into emotional games, whether it's emotional identification, emotional regulation, emotional management. It doesn't matter what the game is, that's what it turns into when it's in my office. I really think that by practicing with kids and helping them build that vocabulary and then working towards them those management skills is really going to help them long-term be both better students and more successful adults when they're able to identify and manage their emotions. I hope that helps.
Hey Confident Counselors, I'm Carrie from Counselor Carrie, and today I wanted to give you 2 quick tips for teaching self-regulation to your students. So first and foremost, I want my students to understand their feelings. I want them to know where they feel those feelings in their bodies, what kind of sensations they have, and I want them to pay attention to their thoughts. So what is this thought telling me about my feelings? What kind of clues is my body giving me? Where in my body do I feel this emotion the most? So what can I be looking for to recognize my feelings? What will my body be telling me that will fill me in so that I know exactly how I'm feeling in the moment? Because when students are able to recognize and label their own feelings in the moment, the chances that they're going to use an appropriate strategy are so much better. We can have our students say, when I feel angry, I will squeeze a stress ball, but if they aren't able to recognize and identify that anger in the moment, it's all for nothing. So they really need to be able to recognize and identify their feelings. Secondly, I want my students to know and be aware of their own triggers. So if we're doing this in a classroom guidance setting, we might do a scoot activity where they can review situations at home or at school that might trigger those feelings of anger and fear and frustration. If we are doing this one-on-one or in small group, we might use a card sort activity instead with the same situations. So afterwards, once students have identified those triggering situations for them, we can make a personalized plan that helps them understand what they can do in the moment when they notice those body sensations, when they notice those thoughts coming in, and when they are aware of the triggers that are going on around them. So for me, recognizing body sensations, paying attention to thoughts, and being aware of triggers are the foundation of self-regulation, and the calming skills come next.
I have a lot of students who do a great job about talking about self-regulation strategies. They can name a lot of different ways to cope. They can practice using those skills with me in my office, but when they're in the classroom or when they're out at recess and they're feeling worried or angry, they don't ever use them. And I was getting really frustrated with this, and then I realized that one of the reasons is because kiddos have a really tough time identifying in the moment that they need to self-regulate. It's really tough for them. So the biggest thing to do to help them is teach them how to catch their feelings in the moment so that they self-regulate when they need to. And one of the ways that I've been helping students with this is to help them identify and understand the physical sensations that come with different feelings. Gabby Garcia's book, Listening to My Body, is really wonderful as a mentor text for showing students that our body has feelings and for encouraging students to just pay attention to their bodies more, because that's not something that a lot of us, including kids, are doing because our brains are just so busy with everything else. I also work with students using a couple different resources I have to help them identify for themselves specifically what body feelings they have when they have the different emotions. And then this allows us to create a plan together where they say something like, I know I'm feeling angry when my heart is beating really fast and my hands are turning into fists. And when my body is doing those things, when my body feels that way, that's when I need to take some deep breaths or go use my classroom's Peace Corner.
Thanks for joining us for this Confident Counselors conversation. You can get in on the conversation at confidentcounselors.com and share your favorite tips and tricks for helping your students with self-regulation. See you there.